From the crossroads of the Ozarks, it's P.I.D. Radio. Welcome. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I am Sharon Gilbert, and we are delighted to be coming to you once again from the barn. Derek was away last weekend, which meant that since I don't know how to do anything when it comes to, hooking up the computers out here, I just didn't even try. I could ask him to show me, but then I'd be expected to do it.
That's right. That's the reason I don't ask you to show me how to use Photoshop.
Yeah, well, and that's why I don't ask, show me how to use that, Final Cut Pro. No, I won't be doing that.
We have our different roles.
We do.
And thank you for taking time out of your schedule to listen to this program, whether you're finding it at YouTube. And if you are, God bless you. Subscribe, share, click that like button, and then download our free app.
Yes, get out of the YouTube jungle and go to the free app.
Because all of our content comes straight from the Christian company that hosts the content and develops the app for us right to your smartphone or tablet. It's available for iOS, Android, Amazon Kindle Fire, the phone or tablet. We've got links to all of those app stores at gilberthouse.org/app. We're also on Roku, Apple TV, and now Amazon Fire TV.
Oh, we're everywhere.
Yeah, so get those devices loaded up and bypass Big Brother.
May need to borrow your hat.
Oh, well, let me swap the hat over here. Eyes a little light sensitive this morning?
Yeah, they are. My eyes have been, some days they're better, some days they're sort of take a step back, but overall progress.
So now you are world's greatest dad. The hat says so it must be true.
Well, I'm not going to identify as that. I'm just not. I choose not to.
Yeah.
By the way, since today is Saturday, some people call it #Catterday, which takes us to our first story.
Oh, yeah. There are a couple of levels to this story. And I'm going to backtrack just a second and just talk a little bit about the event where it became a national thing.
Well, yes. And by the way, if you're sitting there listening with your pets,
yes,
bring your pets closer to them, to the source of the sound and get their opinion on this.
Anyway, the debate.
Mm-hmm.
The debate on Wednesday evening. Was it Wednesday evening or was it Tuesday evening? I forget
I don't know.
now.
It seems so long ago.
Yeah, I know that it was the night that it was Tuesday night. I was talking to Judd Burton and Doug Van Dorn for Iron and Myth. Brian Godawa not appearing in this month's Iron and Myth.
So
we missed, in this film. So we missed the first half of the debate, but I caught the last part and I saw where Donald Trump said, as they were talking about illegal migrants in the town of Springfield, Ohio, which is about half an hour from Dayton. So we were out in that neck of the woods the end of July, where a town of 60,000 people has had 20,000 migrants from Haiti dumped in the town. Well, I don't know, dumped is not the right word, but brought into the community and
redistributed.
It's changed fundamentally the demographics of the town. I mean, as it would. You've got 33% more people in the community, and many of them don't speak English. And there are reports coming from that town that some of these migrants are eating the wildlife, harvesting the ducks and the geese from the local city park.
Perhaps using them in ceremonies. But
also, as Trump said, they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats. This has become sort of a viral meme. And I will say this about the debate. When I watched it with the eyes of an old high school debate team captain, looking at the opportunities that Donald Trump was given to score some policy points, because as per usual, Kamala Harris really didn't say anything. She is a
spinning salad.
Yes, spinning into the future. She didn't say. I mean, there were just so many opportunities, and because she essentially has to run against her own record. Mm-hmm. And Trump.
And I'm sure she was given there are reports that she was given advance
knowledge of the questions.
Questions, and therefore was able to memorize answers.
She was very well rehearsed, and Trump, as he usually does, just goes in and wings it off the cuff. And he is oftentimes hilarious when he does that. And of course, they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats, went viral, and not in a way that most people expected.
Well, the left think it's hilarious.
They think it's hilarious, but what's really hilarious is that when they, for example, some person with some musical chops took that phrase, sampled it, and turned it into a rap tune. And then you've got a bunch of Gen Zs on TikTok that have turned it into a dance video. And they're sharing it around thinking it's mocking Trump. But what's happening is people who weren't aware of the situation in Springfield, Ohio, are now looking it up and finding, what?
Yes, people who will vote.
Yeah.
That's the thing to remember. Those
People
who
who
are
will
targeting
actually vote.
the TikTokers, I would bet that most of them are not voting age, and if they are, won't vote.
They often don't take that responsibility as seriously as people who,
as you and I do.
a little older. It's
and many of our listeners do. In fact, I would venture to say all of our listeners do.
So while I was watching Trump and looking at the missed opportunities to score debate points and thinking at the end of the debate, agreeing with the pundits that I thought Kamala Harris had outperformed expectations, that she had won the debate because
she cheated.
Well, yeah.
I mean, getting the questions in advance, wouldn't that be called cheating?
It would be, but even if she didn't, she had the moderators for ABC News clearly in the tank for her. I mean, they were so in the tank that the following day, CNN, which is no friend of Donald Trump's, called out ABC News for their obvious over-the-top bias. I mean, they fact-checked Trump in real time multiple times, at least half a dozen times. One person, but they didn't interrupt Harris once. Even when at one point I counted 3 hoax, easily debunked by left-wing website type hoaxes that she repeated, and ABC didn't bother to interrupt her. Whereas Trump was saying things that were more than likely true, and he was being interrupted by ABC. So it was a 3-on-1, and Trump knew that going in. But his rhetoric landed in a way that I did not perceive in the moment. And
I don't think that he would have perceived that either. I'm raising my hand because, Mr. Gilbert, because debate rules aside, the debate itself, I don't think is much more than a dog and pony show.
Correct.
So trying to get all worked up because he missed this opportunity or she, doesn't really matter.
Right.
What matters, and this is why I wanted to bring up the story, is that not even slow anymore, an intentional invasion of our country. Now, I'm going to get to the fact that ultimately believers don't live in a country necessarily. We reside in one, but our true citizenship is as within a kingdom. But in this particular area where we live, there are individuals being brought in who do not intend to assimilate. Who cannot in many cases because they're just like fish out of water. They're thrown in. They don't speak English. They don't know the local rules. They are assisted, we'll put it that way, with their food, with their rent, with, I will go in as your quote unquote translator, and I will help you in the DMV to get your permit to learn how to drive. And in some cases, because the idea of permit or permission understood by the Haitians is, now I have my license.
Yeah, I have permission. I have my permit, so I have permission.
Doesn't mean that they know how to drive a car here.
No.
Doesn't mean they ever were behind a wheel.
Yeah. And these are facts that people weren't aware of prior to this week. I mean, prior to this past week, I had no idea that Springfield, Ohio had been flooded with 20,000 Haitian migrants, a town of 60,000 people, now 80,000 people.
Yeah, that is an incredible number.
Right.
You and I were aware that my hometown in Indiana does have Haitian immigrants who have been brought in to work in a local factory or several factories. I don't really know. I know this because they are living in my sister's building.
Yeah.
And she's talked about it. Many other people I know there in Madison have talked about it. I suspect that this story is repeated all across the heartland. Yeah.
And those who are being brought in do not have the same sense of history, attachment to this country as those of us who are born here.
And they're living in the manner to which they've grown up. If they've grown up where you throw the trash out the window, you throw the trash out the window.
Well, Haiti is a country, and I looked this up this past week just to see, okay, what frame of reference do they have as far as the way we in America have grown accustomed to living? We pay taxes. We have a high enough standard of living that we can afford local city services, or that we contract out with a company to come and pick up our trash. And we put our trash in approved receptacles, or in the case of an apartment complex, you put it in the dumpster.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're coming from a country where the per capita income annually is $3,300, I mean, $3,300 per year is the average income.
Which means that many are below that.
Exactly. You don't have those services. You grow up not expecting it, and you're so busy trying to find things to eat that taking care of the trash, making sure it gets dumped in, a city dump or whatever is not high on your priority list.
No. And if you come from a background, spiritually speaking, where you believe your luck comes from the rituals that you perform,
right,
then you will invoke those same deities in the manner in which you did it back in your home country. That's something that you and I were discussing in a recent recording at Skywatch TV, because there's a virtual conference coming up that's going to be announced very soon. I've just totally spoiled it. And a really great list of speakers. You'll find out everything about that conference soon. Just hang in there. But I was telling how I think I'm going to be talking about that very thing.
Yeah.
The idea that importation of people from other countries brings in their gods, as if these are traveling deities that piggyback on humans.
We've talked about this previously, and in fact, I did a program with Dr. Judd Burton on A View from the Bunker a couple of years ago about people bringing their gods with them in the context of essentially having an open border with Mexico. But even the northern border with Canada is porous. There are people who are going through Canada and coming down into Vermont and New Hampshire. Well,
in the 19th century, there was a belief by some in the East End of London that the Jack the Ripper murders were perpetrated by a Dybbuk, a spirit that had come in with someone from Eastern Europe.
The Jewish migrants who had come in from Eastern Europe. This is the premise of the novel by Neil Gaiman some years ago called American Gods, which was turned into a series on, I think it was AMC, but...
one of those.
Yeah, that the old gods led by Odin, Saturn, Kronos, Apollyon,
the storm god.
Yeah, trying to rise up against...
the old storm god, I should say.
Well, yeah, pre-Thor, pre-Baal.
Pre-flood.
Yeah. Trying to take back control over the world from the new gods like social media and things that are distracting people these days. So there were a number of pantheons represented. And again, the premise being that as people emigrated to the United States, they brought with them their gods, the gods who were the pantheon of the native tribes here had been suppressed or defeated by the gods from the old world like Odin. But there is some truth to that, because as they come in fact, Tucker Carlson talked about that this week at a town hall event that he and Dan Bongino held in Tulsa. And he started out, Tucker did, riffing on Trump's statement about dogs and cats and how if PETA doesn't now endorse Donald Trump, they should just close their... I'm never going to...
I love it.
...donate to PETA again. The first president in the history, the more than 200-year history of the United States to publicly condemn eating pets. And if PETA does not endorse Trump now, then they're just hypocrites. But then he went on to point out that, look, whether this is true or not, and it's difficult to confirm, although independent journalist Christopher Rufo found that in Dayton, which is, again, just half an hour from Springfield, some African migrants were found in Dayton grilling cats on the backyard Weber grill. And that this was, and he actually went and talked to the neighbors of the folks had since moved, but confirmed it.
There are a lot of small towns in this area, and I have no idea if this is connected, but there are an awful lot of cats that go missing.
Yeah. But again, is it for that purpose or is it ritual purposes? And that's what Tucker pointed out.
That's just it.
He said we've brought in hundreds of thousands, 700,000 by some point, by some count now, Haitians under special or temporary protected status by the Biden-Harris administration.
Which makes them more special than a citizen.
Well, yeah. They're allowed in. They bypass the normal vetting that takes place when somebody applies for asylum.
Right.
And several 100,000 Venezuelans, too, which is a problem we can talk about.
Oh, huge.
But Carlson pointed out that they're coming from a land where the dominant religion is witchcraft, voodoo, the occult. And the sacrifice of small animals is a regular part and parcel of that belief system. So they're bringing it into the American heartland. And it's not compatible with our way of life. This is not how America. These are not this is not the worldview on which the civilization of the West and the United States is founded.
No, and I won't get into more of my talk. I don't want to spoil too much, but the idea that the West is that our Christian faith is being diluted and replaced with paganism shouldn't really surprise those of us who pay attention to Bible prophecy, because as we near the return of Jesus, the world really does become more and more like it was during the days of Lot and during the days of Noah. Yeah.
Especially since COVID, a lot of churches have really been hurt by COVID. During the lockdowns, people stopped going to church and just have not returned. I was talking to a friend about that this past weekend up in North Dakota. And it's a problem that's affected a lot of churches. Doug Hamp was the other speaker with me there on this past Sunday. And his congregation was affected. And he said he's of the opinion now that we are moving into a post-church era in the United States, that mega churches may hang on for a while, but churches across the country have really taken a hit. And it's not just church membership and church attendance. The Worldview survey done by George Barna at Arizona Christian University every year, and he's done it for a couple of decades now, shows that the percentage of American adults with a biblical worldview, which was at 9% back in the mid-teens, so 2015, 2016, which is about the time that I was co-writing the book, The Day that Earth Stands Still, because we included that information in the book. It's down to 4% now. It's been cut in half since the COVID lockdowns.
You know, another hit that the churches, and by this we mean the gatherings, the congregations that meet in a specific building, on a weekly basis. We're not talking about the ecclesia, the actual body of Christ. There are many of these congregations that are having to shut down because they can't get insurance.
Well, there's that.
That's
too.
Another attack.
Yeah, it's multifaceted, and it's affecting churches. We saw it this year because Whispering Ponies Ranch was just out of the blue dropped by its insurance carrier.
That same carrier has dropped quite a number of congregations.
But it turns out it was
camps.
It was not specific to Whispering Ponies Ranch.
Right.
There have been stories out there in the media now that church insurers across the country are getting hit. And why all of a sudden? Why all of a sudden is this an industry-wide problem?
It does seem to me that post-2020, that things have really sped up. And you and I have talked about this before. If you are new to listening to P.I.D. Radio, you may not have heard us speak on this, so I'm going to mention it. In December of 2020, a conjunction occurred where it seemed to be a handoff between the present God of this world and the old God of this world.
Right.
Post-flood, pre-flood. You want to talk about that?
The winter solstice of 2020 was the great conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn, but this was a
so-called Christmas star.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, this is what the wise men saw. No, it wasn't. Yeah, the close conjunction there was actually 7 BC, which was not in alignment with the most likely birth date for Jesus. According to astrologers, this was a great mutation. The great conjunctions occur every couple hundred years, but the great mutation is when the conjunction takes place in a new sign in the sky. It moves from one of the So they've got and just to be clear, we do not subscribe to astrology. We understand.
No, not at all.
Our fates are not determined by how the planets move in the sky.
No, not at all. But I think that because we are called to see them as signs in the heavens, that was a sign in the heaven.
Yeah, let me.
And what does it represent?
Well, let me find my.
I don't feel like my future is predicated upon what occurred within a certain house in the sky, but I do think it really interesting because Jupiter and Saturn were very close. So close they look like one body.
Let's see. Yeah, it was the closest observable conjunction.
1 degree, I think.
I think. Well, I don't know how close they were, but it was again the closest observable conjunction in something like 800 years. But they met at 0 degrees of the constellation Aquarius, which was the move from one type of sign into another. And I'm trying to find my notes here because I actually talked about this
in your book,
in my book, but I got more into it in
you're talking
after my talk on the second coming of Saturn. I actually dug deeper into it.
Well, the Aquarius sign is an important one. And again, Derek and I do not believe in horoscopes or anything like that, but the ancient constellations and the ideas behind them, the stories behind them, it told a story of what has happened in our history. And many believe it also tells a story of once you come around again, the idea of the Ouroboros, that you're going to repeat that same idea. To a certain extent, the Lord did warn us that as in the days of Noah and as in the days of Lot, there was something going on that were mirrored between those two events. Pre-flood, the head of everything was Shemyaza. Post-flood in Sodom, Derek and I believe that the real sin there is they were trying to bring Shemyaza back. So in other words, they were trying to reboot the world, trying to get back the old golden age, as Virgil would call it.
Here we go. Okay.
Like the way I was vamping there?
Thank you very much for the vamping as I try to find my notes, because I found more about this conjunction and the difference between a great conjunction and a great mutation,
and also
and why it's so important. The difference between the two is so important.
The constellation itself, the so-called house that it was at 0 degrees in.
Right.
That really, I thought, was really significant.
Yeah. Okay. The classical astrologers, Jupiter and Saturn, were the outermost planets in the solar system. You could not observe Uranus and Neptune and Pluto with the naked eye. Pluto's since been demoted, although there's some argument about that. Anyway, they were Jupiter and Saturn. I thought this was really interesting. They were dubbed by astrologers the great chronocraters, the Time Lords.
Yes, I know. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it is. So they have about every 20 years there's a conjunction where they come somewhat close to each other, but this one was really, really close. There's a longer 200-year cycle and then 800-year cycle. So the beginning of a 20-year cycle is a great conjunction, but the 200-year cycles are closer together where they move from one constellation to another, and then 800 years you move from one type of sign, from air signs to earth signs to
water signs.
Yeah, so they moved from earth to air on the winter solstice of 2020, and that's a great mutation. The previous one was 1842. Now, why do astrologers think this is important? Because they believe these great mutations occur alongside major shifts in society, in politics.
Theopolitical shifts.
Rise and fall of empires, death or rise of kings, queens, leaders, new systems of government control. 1842 was really when the Industrial Revolution was getting underway. And it was the beginning of the rise of the United States to the status of world power. In 1842, we were a small regional power, but certainly after World War II, that was changed. World War II was really the United States stepping forward as a superpower.
So this is a great reset that they're
This is a great reset. The great mutation of 2020, astrologers believe that the old systems of measuring success and status no longer apply. Ownership of goods is likely to be shared. We'll see greater value given to intellectual and creative processes because AI and robots will take over the actual hard work.
Richard Florida has forecast all of it in his book.
The Great Reset,
Yes.
exactly. Yeah, ownership of goods likely to be shared. In other words, you will own nothing and you'll be happy.
Mhm.
This all was part of the great mutation of 2020. And like I said, I wanted to get the information correct here because I put this in a presentation I did for Hear the Watchman, but I
Hey, look, when I read stuff that I wrote even last week,
yeah,
I sometimes go, I don't remember writing that.
yeah.
Did I actually write that? Because when I write, it's like I slip into a groove. And I sometimes feel like the stuff just comes out my fingers. It's coming from a history of spending a lot of time researching and thinking about and creating. So it does come out because it's been already stored in my brain, you might say.
Mm-hmm.
But once it's out, it's gone. It's out of my head.
It's gone. It's gone.
It's gone. It's out of here.
Yeah.
I've deleted the files.
So something seemed to happen. And 8 years earlier, the winter solstice of 2012, which was supposed to be the Mayan apocalypse.
Mm-hmm.
But things have really ramped up even since then.
Haven't they?
Where we saw in the 2008 presidential campaign where certain hot button social topics or, well, safe, legal, and rare. And now it's like, let's park a bus out here and give them away for free at the Democratic convention. That's a really, really major shift in the last 16 years. 2020 with, followed by the lockdowns, followed by all of the events that are supposed to coincide in 2025, not least of which, of course, is the Essene calendar, which sort of points to that as the final Jubilee, 50-year Jubilee cycle. Mm-hmm. But things like central bank digital currencies that they want to launch in 2025. And of course, 2025 being the 3.5 years prior to the arrival of asteroid Apophis in 2029.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of things leading to this and very powerful people seeming to just go all in on these globalist, openly communist policies. Why are they doing it? Well, I think because they're looking at the signs in the heavens and thinking the time is now to do these things.
Yeah, and in some ways it's like we're watching plays being, performed before our very eyes in events on the world stage. And they remind me a bit of some of the ritualistic plays that were performed in antiquity. Since people didn't read, we're going to show you what this god or goddess did.
Mm-hmm.
The Journey to the Underworld by Nana.
Right.
And we're going to perform that. And we'll do it again and again. So you can memorize it. Your kids will know it. They'll do it. And we'll act it out. And this is how we, sort of have this tradition passed down from father to son and onward. And you write about this. I wrote about this a little bit, but you really got into it in the second coming of Saturn. The things that occurred in 2021, January.
Yeah.
We won't go into more than that.
Mm-hmm.
But how that seems to be an echo of what happened December of 2020, this moving into Aquarius, because there's another name for Aquarius.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Ganymede.
Yes. And Ganymede's not who we want to be, and yet we are pictured in that role, and we being America, young America.
Right.
In a tableau in the rotunda.
Mm-hmm. Young America is depicted in a scene called Agriculture on the painting on the underside of the Capitol Dome called the Apotheosis of Washington, where young America is a character wearing a Phrygian cap, which is that red soft felt cap, that conical cap. It looks very much like the way Ganymede was depicted in ancient artwork. Mm-hmm. Ganymede was the son of the king of Troy.
Beautiful boy.
According to the poet Hesiod, he was the comeliest of mortal men. And he was so comely that Zeus transformed into an eagle, swooped down, and
liberated him from the earth.
Yeah. And flew him back to... Now, this is the way the story has been kind of cleaned up for consumption where you can read it in high school literature class. He was taken back to Olympus to become cupbearer to the gods, where he would serve Zeus as his cupbearer. But when you look at the artwork from the classical world, say 5th century BC, there's
quite
no.
Look up Ganymede and the paintings.
Yeah.
And the scene and what it's called. We can't say it here
He's
because
not
of
being
rules.
carried entirely.
He's not. But here's the weird thing is Zeus turned into what? An eagle, which is also a symbol of our nation.
So and also of Rome.
Yes, exactly. So what is it saying about our country?
Yeah,
as we move in 2020 and 2021, the symbolism we saw played out.
Inside the Capitol, yeah. Buffalo hat guy, and the symbolism of the buffalo or the bison helmet. The ancient world, the gods of Sumer were always depicted wearing horned hats.
Helmets.
But Kronos, Saturn, Kronos is a name that derives from Semitic, not Greek. And it's a Semitic word that means horns. He was the horned one.
Right.
Bull imagery, bovid imagery. His equivalent in the Canaanite pantheon, El, was called Bull El. So here you got a guy wearing a horned hat coming in and taking over the Capitol, sort of replicating on the ground what happened in the sky with Jupiter handing off the baton back to old dad, Saturn, Kronos,
on
Bull El, on Epiphany, as you pointed out in, you wrote this for Zeitgeist 2025.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, and let me borrow it, so thank you.
Well, like I said, you expanded on it, so all I did was just sort of give you a skeleton
But
view.
The Epiphany, which was the day that where the churches traditionally have celebrated the revelation of Jesus, the godness of Jesus,
the unveiling of the God.
Right, and on that day, in the Capitol, which is named the Capitol because that was the name of the
Capitol.
Yeah, Capitol. The Capitolium was the temple of Jupiter in Rome. So named because when they were digging the foundations, they found a well-preserved human head there, which 6th century BC in Rome, this is how we communicate with the spirits in the afterlife. We use the head as a sort of like a radio tuner receiver.
That temple stood on the top of a hill that had been sacred to Saturn.
Yeah, Mons Saturnus became the Capitoline Hill, and called Capitoline because caput in Latin is the name for head, the word for head. So our Capitol is called the Capitol because it's the name of the temple of Jupiter, who is the Roman form of Baal, the storm god, or Satan. And in that building, on the day we celebrate the revelation, the unveiling of the God Jesus, you get the passing of the baton from Satan back to the old bull god Kronos El, who later comes back as Apollyon or somebody wrote
this in a novel. That's so far-fetched.
Yeah.
And yet, it plays out like a big passion play.
The imagery is all there. Eyes. Yeah, all of that is gone into with much more detail and citations in the second coming of Saturn.
We blathered a lot, so we need to take a quick break and then come back and then...
talk about something, World War III.
A light topic.
I know. Oh, more P.I.D. radio straight ahead. It's time for back to school, and we have a special offer in September at the Gilbert House store.
Back to school, it's impossible to believe. Where did the year go? Well, October is also approaching, so we have a deal for you. $35 only plus shipping and handling will get you 2 amazing books and a CD, which is interviews with Dr. Michael Heiser.
Preparing you for All Hallows Eve, the month of October, when we begin to think about the spirit realm, our book Veneration, which takes a deep dive into the cult of the Nephilim around ancient Israel, the source of the demons that plague the world to this day.
And also a wonderful book by our friend Vicki Joy Anderson, They Only Come Out at Night. This is your manual for spiritual warfare. This should be in your church library.
Those 2 books plus a 7-hour audio CD with Dr. Michael S. Heiser discussing the unseen realm. These 2 books plus the CD, just $35 plus shipping and handling only at gilberthouse.org/store. Welcome back to PID Radio. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and we want to make an announcement for you. First of all, we will not, underline that, not, capital N-O-T, be going to Israel in November of this year. We know that only one or two of you had actually signed up. Thank you for doing that. Thank you so much for doing that. We needed 10 people to make it possible. We cannot go since we don't have enough to make it worth the guide's while to do it.
Yeah, the guide, the driver, and
everybody.
And you get a certain discount for confirming so many rooms at the hotels, that sort of thing.
So anyway, to make the price work and all of that, we couldn't do it with just two. So, but to those of you who did sign up, thank you very much. To those of you who were interested and said, we are interested to Lipkin, thank you for doing that. We will be going back to Israel next spring.
Mm-hmm. March 25th through April 3rd, and we will keep an eye on the situation over there. If anything changes, we'll tell you right away through our typical channels, our app, our website, gilberthouse.org/travel.
You know, when you're going with Timothy Alberino, who's going to be worried about anything?
Oh, no. Oh, he's got a machete.
He'll just stare at him. It's Alberino, run!
The Iron and Myth Tour of Israel, Doug Van Dorn, Dr. Judd Burton, and Timothy Alberino. Please join us for that, because we'll be visiting, God willing, all the sites that we would normally see on our tour, including Gilgal Rephaim, the Serpent Mound of Bashan, the Shamir Dolman Field, including the dolmen with the 50-ton capstone.
Yes, which very few people have seen.
Yes.
And also going to Kibbet Betacha.
Yes, the ruins of Beth Saida, which is not actually the old town of Beth Saida, but we want that on the tour as well. But this is a site similar to Gilgal Rephaim that nobody seems to know about, even though it's only 2 miles from the Sea of Galilee and right on the bank of the Jordan River.
Yeah.
It's
an incredible hike to get back there, walk through some goat paths. But
there's a faster way. We went in the wrong way. We should have gone in through Jordan Park, which is easily accessible. It's like 900 feet from the parking lot to the site.
But the park was closed.
Yeah, but when we go back, it should be open.
Oh.
It's a public park. It's open on a regular basis. So it's, we went in the back way using the cow path.
Silly us, but it was a fun way to go in.
It was. So, but we will get there, and whether it's, so anyway, if you're interested, you can put down a deposit. Lipkin Tours, very honorable people. If things need to change because of whatever, if we need to reschedule, as we had to do during the lockdowns, we will. They will refund your money if you cannot accommodate the new dates. They will.
They've been really, really good about always doing that.
So do check out our store. We've got GHTV and Red Wing Saga T-shirts, GHTV mugs,
P.I.D. radio hats.
P.I.D. radio hats now. P.I.D. radio merch, shirts and hats as well.
I know, and mugs and all sorts of things. We need some dog sweaters, some dog. Dog hats.
That would be awesome.
Not fog hat.
No.
Dog hat.
So check that out at gilberthouse.org/store, gilberthouse.org/video for our streaming video teachings and documentaries. You can get those instant access full HD at gilberthouse.org/video.
Oh, yeah. Well, you mentioned before the break, just a light topic, World War III.
Yeah.
But I hate to say this, but I think we've already started it.
We're in the early stages of it.
Yeah.
And I pray that it fizzles before it
Wouldn't
gets
that be
more
nice?
kinetic. But as we're recording this on Saturday, September 14th, yesterday, Friday the 13th, Sir Keir Starmer, who's the Prime Minister of the UK now. For now.
I think he's going to be replaced soon.
Yeah. He was in D.C. and had a long meeting with Joe Biden.
With Joe Biden?
So we say. Yeah. So we are told anyway.
Was he wearing the MAGA hat?
Yeah, hilarious scene. He got trolled at some campaign stop by some guy. Here, sign this hat here, and he carried off a MAGA hat. And like, Joe, what do you
took it onto the plane with him?
So anyway, they did not hold a press conference afterward. So we are just relying on the official press reports. But the point of the meeting was to try to encourage Biden, to persuade Biden to authorize Ukraine to use long-range American-provided missiles and also UK-provided missiles, the Storm Shadow missiles and the U.S. missiles called the ATACMS, ATACMS, to make long-distance missile strikes inside Russia. Now, Monday this past week, Ukraine launched its biggest drone attack on Moscow since the beginning of the war, which has been going on for 2.5 years now. So you can only do so much damage with an explosive-laden drone, but you start launching these missiles. They're harder to shoot down than drones, and they can carry much bigger payloads. Vladimir Putin said on Thursday this past week that if these missiles start falling inside Russia, recognizing that the Ukrainians don't have the technical capability to target those missiles, would mean that British or American military personnel were providing the intel and programming the missiles themselves.
But it's okay if Iran gives them missiles.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're buying the missiles from North Korea and from Iran. And that's what David Lammy, the UK foreign minister, said, that the fact that Iran is giving or selling missiles to Russia is a game changer in the debate over whether Ukraine should be allowed to use long-range missiles against Russia. But Putin is saying, look, if you do this, it is war with NATO.
He has been saying, Putin has been saying that this is a war with NATO for some time, almost from the very beginning. And this goes back to 2014, this whole tension, and maybe even before, because it goes back to our country, primarily our country, but NATO, placing missile systems on the border with, frankly, Russia, as
Poland,
far as they're concerned.
Romania.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they were pointed towards Russia. Now, wouldn't you take that as, let's all talk missiles of October from 1962, that when Russia tried to do that here in the United States in Cuba, we got pretty testy about it.
We did, yeah.
Thank you, John F. Kennedy, for standing up.
He went to the brink of war, and the Russian ships, they blockaded Cuba, and if the Russian ships had tried to run the blockade, there would have been a shooting war.
Right. Well, add into all of this mix, the United States through NATO and the UK supplying weapons to Ukraine so that they can go after Russia, because Russia is seen as the really evil, the maximum evil, the villain of the Bond movie in this scenario. But at the same time, Starmer has stopped sending weapons to Israel because they're also the bad guys somehow. But then we've got BRICS, and that is so sort of contrast that with NATO. And then in the middle is Turkey, who wants to play both sides against the middle. Right.
Turkey is a NATO member, but they made it clear this past week they want to join BRICS.
Yeah.
Which is mainly an economic bloc, but
it's not. It's a trade bloc, which means they trade weaponry. Weaponry.
Sure. Yeah. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, but also now including Iran, the UAE, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia is considering joining. Thailand and Malaysia have asked for admission as well.
Yes, but this trade bloc could also form their own currency.
They could. And they've talked about doing that. In terms of purchasing power parity, which is, factors, cost of living.
PARODY, if only.
Parity, yes. It factors cost of living into how you calculate what the money can buy. BRICS nations now they exceed in terms of collective GDP, the G7, which are the 7 leading Western economies. Used to be the G8 until Russia got kicked out.
Isn't that interesting? There was 7 and 8, and then
now it's 7 again. Yeah, 8 was one of the 7. Yeah,
or something.
So if Turkey joins BRICS or wants to join BRICS, it's very likely that Russia would say, "Well, we'd love to have you, but you're going to have to leave NATO." Erdogan may use that as his excuse to leave NATO. And I don't think NATO would be, we want the bases there that Turkey has to offer, but Turkey is creating some problems because they keep agitating for war with Greece, which is also a NATO member.
Yeah, well, the BRICS nations are essentially surrounding Israel.
Yeah.
By the way, speaking of one of the founding members of the BRICS, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. Collective, yeah.
The Borg.
The Borg, yeah. India, they are in the midst of, I think it's day 7 today, of the Ganesha celebrations. And there was a very interesting story that I shared on X this morning about the police carrying off an idol, a Ganesha idol. And it was something about a procession that had been attacked. Other people were throwing stones at the members in the procession because they process along to, and again, this is ritualistic plays. These are very old. And it goes back to before people could read, this is what the story is. And you carry this elephantine statue down to the river and put it in the river. Well, the police had to seize the statue because it was part of this crime that they were arresting over 50 people for. And there were photographs taken, and it got around on social media. And people are very angry. How dare you kidnap the god? You've desecrated the god. Ganesha is one of Shiva's sons.
Okay.
And considered a very important luck figure. So you would sacrifice to Ganesha if you need good luck or good fortune. And I guess if they take your statue, it's like, you took my TV, I can't contact the TV god anymore.
The spirit realm.
And it gets into the idea that these are, yes, mankind creates these, but when we give them permission, the spirit realm can then inhabit that stone or porcelain or bit of wood or whatever it is. And that's whatever that thing represents. And it gets back to the idea of sympathetic magic and projection magic and predictive magic and the deities that are being brought into our country and many others. Because immigration is all over the world. Huge people groups are moving. And this often precedes a major shift in history itself.
Which gets back to the whole idea of the Great Mutation. Or the Fourth Turning, if you want to go there.
And that's another book that if you haven't read The Fourth Turning, you should. Read The Great Reset by Florida and also The Fourth Turning.
Is The Fourth Turning the name of that book?
I think there's actually a book called The Fourth Turning, yeah.
I know.
I don't think it's Florida's book.
No. Tom Horn has written about this. It's, The Fourth Turning in American Prophecy by William Strauss and Neil Howe.
Yeah.
They're generational theories that every 20 years there's a cycle of change, and basically 4 cycles that every 80 years something really massive transformational takes place, and it's usually unpleasant. So you go back 40 years from 2020, or 80 years, excuse me. You get the 1940s, of course, World War II. Go back 80 years from there, and you're at, 1860?
Which was Civil War.
U.S.
and
Civil
then other
War.
wars
and
overseas,
other wars,
the
right.
Crimean War, which in many ways is still being fought. Because it was one of the last gasps of the Ottoman Empire.
Right. 80 years prior to that, 1780, United States, the American Revolution against the Brits. So, and then
in the same time period, the French Revolution. 1789.
So a lot of things potentially happening. And again, we're coming back to 2024, and we've got these massive population shifts with massive amounts of immigration from the Middle East into Europe and into the United States. Again, these threats of wanting to widen the war in Ukraine. I'm just stunned at the way. I mean, growing up, it seemed to me like the Democrats were the peacemakers, even though Lyndon Johnson presided over most of the Vietnam War. But
neither side.
Yeah, I mean, Labour and the Starmer government, Trudeau in Canada, basically said that it fully supported Ukraine's right to launch long-range strikes into Russia.
And how would he feel if someone said, we fully support the United States' right to, launch long-range into Canada?
Yeah.
Suddenly he would say, you can't do that. No, I think that we are moving into World War III territory. Yeah. And if Jesus tarries and 100 years from now, historians look back, they may point back to 2020 as when it all kicked off. 2020, or even, as you say, 2014, when the United States backed the Maidan Revolution that kicked out the Russian-backed president of Ukraine and replaced him with a Western-backed supporter. Yep. Ukraine began attacking in the Donbass, the regions that wanted to break away. And there are many things going back. I mean, you can go back to the Orange Revolution 2004 during the George W. Bush administration. So we've been meddling in that part of the world for a long time, and it has not enhanced or improved the lives of the people of Ukraine. That's for sure. Not at all. So also this week, a couple of other odd things to talk about. California set a new record for earthquakes in a single year. There was an earthquake under L.A. Marzulli's house.
That's right.
So I'm wondering, what's he sitting on?
Don't know, or what he's stirring up. Maybe they're trying to silence.
L.A.'s.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was very shallow.
Yeah. Centered in the Malibu region.
Mm-hmm.
The official word is a magnitude 4.7. LA texted me and said it was a 5.1.
Yeah, that's what I saw originally. I don't know, it was downgraded, but
yeah.
It was so shallow, he said his house was lifted up.
Yeah, no damage, thankfully.
Yes.
So he and Peggy are okay.
We are very grateful for that.
Amen to that. But yeah, this was felt all over the Los Angeles area. The initial report was 5.1. It's been downgraded since then to a 4.7. But again, California has been shaking a lot this year.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like to try to read too much into natural disasters. I mean, is this God's judgment, that kind of thing?
No, we are told that there will be lots of earthquakes.
In diverse places. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is another one of those. So just pray for the people of California. I mean, we really had hoped for their sake, and because we like having them closer by, that L.A. and Peggy had decided to stay in Oklahoma City.
I know. I was really disappointed. Closer. I understand why they wanted to go back there.
Well, yeah.
I mean, but
he had really built that with his own hands.
I know.
Years
literally,
ago. And
with
so
his own hands.
Rebuilt the house had it rebuilt after the big fires out there a couple of years ago. But boy, I just, looking at the state of California, there was I won't say it was funny, but it was an interesting bit of political jujitsu by Republicans in the California General Assembly, where they're a minority. I mean, California is essentially a one-party state at this point. Republicans had stepped aside and refused to block a couple of bills for reparations. And California is already facing a multi-billion-dollar budget deficit. They basically called the bluff of Democrats. I mean, Democrats were kind of using it to say these Republicans are standing in the way of reparations to the descendants of slaves. Bearing in mind that California, when it was admitted to the Union, was admitted as a free state. Slavery was never legal in California.
Right.
But they are wanting to allocate billions, tens of billions of dollars in reparations to the descendants of slaves and so on. And so Republicans are like, okay, fine. They stepped aside. And then the Democratic leadership in the General Assembly is like, if we send this to the governor, he's going to have to veto this because we don't have the money. Mm-hmm. So they tabled the bills. And the supporters of the bills are now really irate at the Democratic leadership in California.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they got away with tabling it this time. It would have been very awkward for Gavin Newsom if he'd had a bill on his desk for reparations and had to veto the bills.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been difficult to explain because he's probably going to try to run for president in 2028, I think.
Mm.
Anyway, it was that's the current state of play in California. They are so far left and so lost. And I think that may be one of the reasons they're letting in so many new arrivals, because people are fleeing the state, but they don't want to lose seats in the House of Representatives when they do the next census in 2030. So if we bring in more people, even if they're not here and documented, they still count on the census. So they still get the same, it counts towards their representation in Congress, which is
so all
weird.
those Haitians?
Wherever they're coming from, a lot of Chinese nationals crossing that border. Yeah.
Well,
one other thing I want to talk about here, and this was a bit disturbing as we're getting close to wrapping this.
And we got a question we need to answer too.
Oh, yeah. Almost forgot about that. Thanks for bringing that up. I will bring that up here. In the recent elections in Jordan, the Islamist opposition party, and bearing in mind, the king of Jordan basically exercises most of the power. The legislative body is, their parliament doesn't really have a lot of power, but it does show where the sentiments of the people are. The Islamic Action Front, which is the political arm of the Muslim Brotherhood, won 31 seats out of 138 in their parliament. That's
a lot.
This is triple the last election. But when you add to that actually, even though it's a smaller percentage, about a quarter of the legislature, under Jordanian law, a certain number of seats have to be reserved for minority parties and for women.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually pretty progressive for a Muslim nation.
It really is.
Yeah. but the party, the Islamic Action Front, actually got 56% of the votes cast.
Mm.
And add to that the National Islamic Party, which is likewise a pro-Islamist Sharia law, party. They got another 10%. So basically 2/3 of the votes cast in Jordan's recent parliamentary elections were voting for Islamist parties.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a bit concerning.
Well, I'm sure the king is keeping a, close eye on what's happening around him.
Yeah, he has to, because Iran is trying to meddle in the politics of Jordan because they want to add another front to its proxy war with Israel. It's already got Hamas, or what's left of it, in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon. If they can topple the king of Jordan, or at least raise up enough paramilitary groups in Jordan,
Sorry.
that may serve their ends just as well.
Well, there was just recently an incident at the Allenby Bridge where a truck coming over from Jordan had individuals inside that started killing people.
Yeah, 3 people killed at that crossing. And it's, whether it's the Allenby crossing or other places along the Jordan River, somehow a lot of arms paid for by Iran have been smuggled into Samaria, which is why the IDF launched a rather massive operation, an IDF operation in certain towns like Tulkarm, which is just east of Tel Aviv, places that are hotbeds for terrorism. These are difficult times, so pray for the peace of Israel. When you see these stories, and a lot of people who don't know the history of that region and assume that what the media reports is accurate, that Israel's the aggressor here and that they stole the land from the Arabs who'd lived there since forever, that's not the actual story.
It is not. It's one reason we wanted to go again to Israel in November, so more of you could experience and talk to the people there, see for yourself what's going on. But we'll be there next spring.
We will. We're working on a video to show you what we saw in March, or May, this past May.
Mm-hmm. Good friend of ours is editing.
Did a presentation on that at the Go Therefore conference in Ohio back in July, and that's available at our streaming video site for free. You can go to gilberthouse.org/video, and it's right there. You can watch that and see some of what we saw. They did a really good job on the production values, but the video that we're working on now will show more video clips so you can see what we saw while we were there. And hopefully we'll have that out within the next couple of months. But if you want to get a look at just me talking with some slides in the background, including a couple of video clips.
Good talk.
Well, thank you, sweetheart.
It is a really powerful talk.
You can catch that at our website, gilberthouse.org/video.
So question.
Let me see what we've got in the way of questions here.
It's like PMQs, but it's not the Prime Minister. It's Derek and Sharon, DSQs.
Let's see. We've got a few here. You want to deal with Behemoth? Do we want to talk about who were the angels God appointed over the nations after Babel?
We addressed that already. If we didn't, they were probably similar to the angels that were pre-flood, that these are powerful angels that were sent here to shepherd the various language groups through the transition, because everybody spoke one language and suddenly they didn't, and they were all panicking, and what do we do? All the guys that knew how to build things are over there, that kind of thing. But these angels, they chose to rebel, and it's very possible that the pre-flood watchers were similarly sent down here with a mission to take care of the humans who are learning how to survive outside of Eden.
Yeah, that was the understanding of the early church. And by the way, this question from Deb, dealing with the 70 angels, or the 70 nations, bearing in mind that 70 is a number that's just symbolic. It means all of them.
Yeah, so it could be 200, 300, 400, I don't know.
Right. The point being that all of the nations were allotted different angelic guides, if you will.
And then the Lord took one nation for himself. Right.
So that's the Deuteronomy 32 worldview, Deuteronomy 32 verse 8, which states that when the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind after Babel, he fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. There are those who look at that phrase and say, well, sons of God, that's in the New Testament, that means, faithful followers of Jesus.
No.
But in the Septuagint, which was the version translated into Greek in the 3rd century BC, so Jewish religious scholars in the centuries before Jesus, this gives us an idea of how they understood that passage. They wrote, when the Most High distributed nations as he scattered the sons of Adam, he set up boundaries for the nations according to the number of the angels of God. So they understood it to mean supernatural beings.
Now, I don't think that it necessarily means this is all the angels God has, and therefore he's good. No, I think it's all the ones he sent down.
Yeah. And this is confirmed in Deuteronomy 4, beginning at verse 19. Beware lest you raise your eyes to heaven, and when you see the sun and the moon and the stars, all the host of heaven, the heavenly army, you be drawn away and bow down to them and serve them, things that the Lord your God has allotted to all the peoples under the whole heaven. God allotted them to the nations. Then verse 20, but Yahweh has taken you and brought you out of the iron furnace, out of Egypt, to be a people of his own inheritance, as you are this day. And that's echoed in Deuteronomy 32, verse 9. God chose the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob for his own people. So, Deb, that's
great question.
Short form, good question. So those other, in fact, I talked about this last night. I did a Q&A session with Justin Brown for Prometheus Lens, his Prometheus Lens podcast, and was asked about that. Are those 70 post-Babel, or however many it is, still with us today? And I would say yes.
Yes, I think they are. I really do.
Satan being one of them.
Well, yes. He may have been here pre-flood. I think that he's been a constant.
Right.
But we see a hint of this in Daniel when he talks about the prince of Persia and the prince of Greece. These are the deities, the angels, if you want to call them that are in charge, that were sent down to help and instead decided to take worship.
I think that's it. And again, that's the understanding of the early church fathers. Some of the early Christian theologians argued that those angels were tempted by the love of women. They'd been sent here to administer creation and allowed themselves to be deceived, or, well...
The pre-flood ones, you mean?
The pre-flood ones. Either they were... some of them seem to imply that women seduced them, and I don't know that that's the case. I
sort of doubt that. That's not what the Bible says. They saw...
that the daughters of man were attractive and took wives of any they chose. So blaming it on the women trying to seduce them in exchange for favors, don't know. But,
especially in the book of Enoch, where you see that they were taught how to make themselves prettier.
Right. Trade, we'll give you secret knowledge for the women's. So that was the understanding of the early church. So, William, yes, we have not forgotten your question about the holy fire in the brazen altar. Need to look that up. We will answer that tomorrow on the Gilbert House Fellowship.
I'm going to leave that to you. You're going to have to look that up. I'm going to do that
up today.
I need to go because when Derek was out of town, I decided to move some furniture around in our family room. And one of those was a bookcase that I thought, I've moved this before, no problem. And I know how to move heavy things. So I was doing it the correct way. However, in this case, the floor was really sticky and it did not move. My back, however, did.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was one of those situations where you literally hear and feel the pop.
Yeah. Ouch.
Yeah. So I have a lumbar strain or sprain, whichever you want to call it, but a ligament was probably torn and I am dealing with it. Ice initially, and I've been doing a heat on it and taking NSAIDs and trying to rest it, but sitting for very long is stressing it.
Yeah. Well, we'll close with that then. Tomorrow, of course, our Gilbert House Fellowship Bible Study. That'll be released by midday tomorrow, and then tomorrow evening, 7 p.m. Central Time, UTC -5, Iron and Myth, episode 33. 33. And we talk about...
talking about?
Yes, we're talking about something on the 33rd parallel.
Used to be on 3333.
Yes, Mount Hermon. We were surprised. It's like, we've not talked. We've been doing this for more than 2.5 years now. We've not yet talked specifically about Mount Hermon. We've talked about things related to it, like the Watchers and the Nephilim and other stuff.
Was it that it used to be on 3333 or that it used to be on 3330?
It was at 33 degrees, 30 minutes east, 33 degrees, 30 minutes north. Now, it's still at 33.33, 33 degrees, 33 minutes north, but the east, the longitude moved when they moved the prime meridian 0 degrees from Paris to Greenwich. Mm-hmm. So 33.33 degrees north. So it was now in the east. Yeah, it's now in the eastern Mediterranean, but used to be right over Mount Hermon. But there is a connection there to the, which reminds me, I need to update the show notes for tomorrow night's episode. David Flynn, years ago, back in 2005, wrote a wonderful piece that's still available on the web, and I'll link to it, on the occult translation of the Roswell event. And he links the location of the Roswell event in 1947 to Mount Hermon.
He gets into some crazy numbers that I'll tell you what, when you really dig into it, you realize the world is a whole lot more complicated than we think.
Right. He connected it, Mount Hermon, to Roswell and to the winter solstice of 2012.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
how about that?
Yeah, pretty amazing stuff. So that's tomorrow night on A View from the Bunker. And of course, you can watch that on our app, on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV. And until tomorrow, I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert. And for Grace and Glory, that I have no idea what they're doing in the house right now. Bye-bye, everybody.
P.I.D. Radio is produced by Gilbert House and released under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Follow us online, Twitter @P.I.D. Radio, or the P.I.D. Radio page at Facebook. Join us each week for our online Bible study, the Gilbert House Fellowship, online at gilberthouse.org.